right, so again, I'm Jeff, the sales manager at Borgeson. I've been with the company for 1 or 2 years now. I'd like to welcome you to the 2014 HRIA Education Day seminar. A little bit about myself. I started my tinkering with gas-powered stuff, with dirt bikes, motorcycles. Tell you a little embarrassing story. My older cousin gave me a motorcycle. It was a Suzuki DR100, and he's like, "No, it ran when I parked it. It's great. It ran when I parked it." So I get this thing home. My parents are flipping out because I'm all of about 9 years old and going to fire up this motorcycle. Brilliant Jeff says, "Maybe there's no gas in it." Holds a lighter over the damn fill tank to the gas can. You know what a jet engine sounds like close up? Whoosh! There goes the hair and the eyebrows. So I've made mistakes. I've screwed things up. I've fixed things. And I just have fun with the industry and fun with the hobby. You're supposed to move when I press that button. Borgeson Universal Company, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary this year. We have been manufacturing in the same city, in the same state since 1914. All of our buildings, this is the original building here, circa 1920, with some of the, it's a hard-ass looking crew back then, wasn't it? You don't mess with those boys. And we've evolved a little bit since then. This is an overhead shot, or no, that's right, never mind. I should leave my notes out. We've been manufacturing components for street rods, race cars, off-road vehicles, sand rails. Here, throw one at you. The machine that cuts the corn off the cob. We make U-joints for that. We've got U-joints in outer space. We've pretty much, if anybody has a need for a U-joint and we have the capability to make it and the volume's there, we'll do it. The Green Giants corn cutting machines, each one of them uses 12 of our 1-inch split block style U-joints, and they order them 1,000 at a time. I don't know how many corn cutting machines exist in this world, but we're thankful they exist. It's an overhead of our new, you saw the original building. This is our new 50,000 square foot manufacturing facility. When we built this, when we moved into this in 2004, we were like, oh, thank God, we finally doubled our building. Now we get to stop moving. Yeah, you see that field behind the building there? We're about to drop another 40,000 square feet there because we ran out of space already. A little bit of the inside of our manufacturing facility. We're a full CNC machine shop. The owners are tool makers and manufacturer engineers by trade. The company's owned by father and son, Alan and Jerry Zordon, and they've just been doing great things with it. And everything that we make right there. We don't, if we have a part we have to buy, we'll buy it from another American company until we hit a volume that can support manufacturing it, and then we'll make it. It's what we are. We're a manufacturer. We're not everything to all people, but what we do it right. I'm sure most of you are familiar with our U-joints. This is where the company started in 1914. What they made, U-joints, single joints, double joints. We've got them available steel, stainless steel, polished stainless steel. We even have them available in aluminum. Got the U-joints, just straight couplers and adapters. And I'm going to breeze through this part because this is about power steering conversions. But again, I talk so fast, we're probably 5 minutes into it and I'm halfway done here. I'm just kidding, we got more. These components we had been manufacturing long before the power steering conversion, but as we developed the different conversions, all these components fit right in to package things up in kits for people. You need the rag joints, you need the couplers, you need the U-joints, you need all that other stuff to go with it. Of course, the shafting to connect everything up. Support bearings, we have many different styles, some nice billet ones, a flange bearing to come through the firewall, the rod end style that most people go for. But here we are, we breezed through that, now we're here to talk about modern power steering conversions. Us as a manufacturer, we've seen a trend lately. We grew and we started as a street rod company. Everybody was building street rods and we were selling U-joints as fast as we could make them. Well, the customer base started changing, started getting different age retirees, and now everybody's kind of graduating to the muscle car stuff. 50s and up, get a nice car, make it a nice driver, do the resto mod deal, give it good brakes, give it good steering so you can hang on the road with all the nuts out there. And that's really where our customers have been pushing our company. And we answered. It's what we've been working on. There's three basic ways that somebody's going to add power steering to an older car. The first way out there, the first option is horrible, but it works, which is a Bendix slave cylinder control valve, you know, the contraptions hanging underneath the car that ram the tires back and forth. Yep, like the Ford. Yep, Ford's used them. Corvette used it up until 1982. Yep. Yeah, you got it. It's a great idea to have two hoses in constant motion going back and forth. And then integral power steering boxes, and of course the latest generation of power steering would be power rack and pinion. In a Bendix setup, these are your basic components. You're going to have a manual steering box. That manual steering box and pitman arm is actuating a control valve, which is turning on hydraulic flow to the ram, which is just basically ramming your tires left and right. Again, the control valve actuates all that. The one big drawback on that is that control valve doesn't know if the steering box is turning it on or the tires are turning it on from following grooves in the road. So you often, with that style of steering, no matter how fresh you do, no matter how many tie rod ends you throw at it, no matter how many ball joints you do, your car is going to float down the road like this. And that's perfectly normal. And this just tells you everything that I just did. Love redundancy. So the benefits of Bendix power steering, the one benefit, actually there's two. First one is it provides adequate power assist to reduce the effort at the steering wheel. I mean, when they first came out with it, talking big cars, heavy front ends, they made it easy so anybody can drive them. It's not a wrestling match anymore. The design of the Bendix system didn't have any real negative effects on steering geometry. All the front suspension stayed the same, the way it was designed. It does give you that real loose, vague feel with little to no driver feedback. You're floating it down the road, you're turning it with a pinky, you're going like this. Of course, the system is prone to leaks. We talked about that. You've got two hoses in constant motion going back and forth every time you turn the wheels, which does keep the underside of the car well lubricated. There's the other benefit. This is the earliest form of power steering used. You know, people will jokingly call it tractor steering too. Just, I mean, it's a mess. Phased out of production vehicles by 1982. The last two vehicles to use it were the Ford Granada and Chevrolet's flagship, the Corvette. Which they're getting all those out of the hole if you've been following that. I think 3 or 4 of them are up now. Next generation of power steering was an integral power steering box. That's where your valve, your manual steering box, and your hydraulic assist piston have basically been squished together, combined, and put into one piece that operates it. You're still running standard drag link, inner and outer tie rod ends, but the box itself, you just need to run 2 hoses to the pump so you don't have hoses moving anymore, and the box is providing power to the pitman arm. So there's none of that feedback steering either, because if the road feeds back into the pitman arm, it's not like it's the valve, it's not going anywhere. Your basic components, the box, the pump, and 2 hoses. If you're going to have a remote style pump with a remote reservoir, you know, to get it out of the way somewhere, of course you're going to have 3 hoses, but that's the basic simplicity of it right there. Your benefits, you're always going to have the inside of a power box is a recirculating ball, manual steering gearbox. You will always have positive control of that vehicle. Nothing's ever going to break. If the power steering goes away, you have a manual steering car, which will be harder to turn than a manual steering car just because of the hydraulic resistance of the piston trying to go back and forth. That's why it's never a good idea to cut hoses and call it manual steering, because you want to get rid of the pump. The input of the steering wheel is actually actuating a torsion bar. The torsion bar sets the effort at the steering wheel, how hard it is to turn the wheel. And that actuates the valve assembly, which is going to direct fluid to either side of the piston inside the box, which is going to push your tires left or right. This, again, there is no negative effects on steering or suspension geometry. Everything stays the same as it was. Can be used on straight axle or independent front suspensions. And interestingly, this is the strongest form of power steering available. That's why you see the 2500 and 3500 series trucks, they're not jumping on the rack bandwagon because they need strong steering, and the rack just won't hold up. Power rack and pinion. This one, I mean, people love it. Not going to say anything bad about rack and pinion. All my daily drivers, they have rack and pinion. The cars were designed around rack and pinion, so that's a piece of cake. Rack and pinion eliminates all your wear points. You have no more inner and outer, well, you get rid of a lot of tie rod ends, you get rid of a drag link, you get rid of a pitman arm, idler arm, and again, you're just running hoses to your pump. You could get away with 2 hoses, but this is showing you a remote style pump setup. Which, hey, look, that says it. This was first used in the 70s in domestic production vehicles. I mean, you saw this come in, of course, the most awesome Mustang ever created, the Mustang II, because it gave us all of those great front ends to chop up and put underneath hot rods. This eliminates, like I said, most of your wear and flex points. It is the most modern evolution of power steering, except for the Delphi 600 series of gearboxes. They weren't introduced until '99. Rack and pinions do provide better feedback, again, because you have less flex points, less wear points. You're eliminating those, but they do wear out a lot quicker than steering boxes. All those little tie rod ends and little wear points, well, they absorb some of the stress of the road. The rack and pinion, bang, every time it gets hit, you're gear to gear, and that's what's going to wear out the rack. Now we'll get a little biased part, because I don't know if you're too familiar with us, but we don't do rack and pinions. We're a steering company. We've made a decision that we're going to do something with steering boxes, because there's plenty of people who do rack and pinions, and there's plenty of people who don't want rack and pinions. Classic vehicle steering and suspension, and it's always important to remember, it was designed around a steering box. Now we're talking about your upper and lower, control arm pivots. We're talking about your tie rod pivots, keeping all that in line to avoid bump steer. Racks didn't exist back then, so to take a car, say a 55 Chevy that's got, wheel width is A, your pivots on your control arms are here. You got to find a rack that's exact to put in that vehicle. You can't do close enough or you'll have bump steer issues. So certainly, you can put a rack on an older vehicle. It's just a lot harder to do than some people think it is, as far as just bolting a rack to a car. Steering boxes have another advantage. They're going to maintain the full factory turning radius. A steering box with a 6-inch long pitman arm that rotates 90 degrees through its range of motion gives you 8 inches of travel left to right at its full extremes. Rack and pinions, the highest production rack, is about 5.5 inches left to right throw. So unless you have the ability to change the length of your steering arms out on your spindles, you're going to give up turning radius switching a steering box car to a rack and pinion by just bolting it on using the same steering arms, because you don't have the throw to it. Steering boxes do offer a lot simpler connection to the column. Most of them, especially in classic applications, connect right up with a rag joint because the box is right there at the column. You don't need to rely on any engineered brackets to attach the steering to the frame. I mean, the box just bolts to the stock location where it goes. And steering boxes also don't alter ground clearance like some rack and pinion cradle kits can that hang underneath there to position the rack. Now, the little bit about what we're doing, again, we're making power steering boxes for cars that never had a power steering box as an option. I mean, once you got up to 65, most of GM's lineup had an integral power box, except for, again, the Corvette and the Nova. The Nova held on to the slave cylinder setup until 68. But most of those cars had a steering box. Ford, they're a little bit different. But our conversion boxes have been designed to bolt directly to the factory steering box mounting location, right where the vehicle engineers intended all of that stress to be on that vehicle's frame, right where the steering box goes. Our boxes will connect directly to a stock pitman arm and stock steering linkage, and we'll give you a nice direct connection to the stock steering column. Most of our boxes just use a rag joint or a half a rag joint or a straight coupler to attach right up to the existing column. Any of our conversion boxes are going to maintain your full stock turning radius. You will never lose turning radius, and your steering and suspension geometry stays the way it was. Some of these old cars, they weren't perfect from the factory, but you're not going to change it by putting in a power steering box. You know, the boxes we're using, we always take a very modern steering box to turn it into a conversion box, because when they first came out with power steering, they made what I call a one-finger wonder. Chrysler's really famous for them, where you slap the steering wheel and it goes zzz, zzz, lock to lock, piece of cake. Ever since then, they've been dialing back the effort on steering boxes so people don't oversteer and it's not so loose and floaty. That in combination with just suspension technology that allows the manufacturers to make less turns lock to lock without soccer moms killing themselves and flipping vehicles going down the road because the steering's too quick. We'll kind of walk you through how we create these steering boxes. We have a couple gentlemen, they have the dirtiest job at Borgeson. They receive bulk steering gear cores, you can see on the left over there. I mean, we buy these in hundreds at a time, as many as we can, depending on what box we use. We use different cores for different applications. Some of these things lately, we've actually hit a volume where we're buying the starting point in brand new rather than buying in a core because we can't get enough core supply. The pile on the left is a bunch of, I'll tell you what they are. They're Isuzu Rodeo and Trooper steering cores, which got turned into the picture on the right, which is a beautiful Mustang conversion box. It also works in the Falcons and Comets as well. First thing we do is we receive all this in, completely disassemble everything, and break it down to a component level. I don't know what that little yellow piece of paper is. It probably has a count on it or something somebody threw in there. After everything is completely disassembled, the cases, the castings actually get machined. All the original mounting locations are being machined off of there. You can see kind of the front view and back view, how that's gone away. And what we do, what we've developed the ability to do, is to take that machined plate you see in the center there, it's keyed to fit the box on the right, and we're able to TIG weld that to that box in such a way that you will completely destroy the casting before you will ever make that plate separate from that box. We try it. We do destructive testing. It's fun. After the thing's welded on there, you know, it's fixture welded for consistency, plus we got to make these the same every time. And this is one that's been welded and then it's been tumbled clean. I mean, at that point it looks like a brand new casting, like it was cast and built and ready to be a Mustang steering box. While that's apart, one thing we have to do as well, all the modern power steering boxes use much larger diameter sector shafts than the classic cars did. But we have the machining capabilities to take that original spline, turn it down, and respline it to whatever diameter we need to fit whatever classic car application we're going after. And that's the biggest hang-up where people always want to know, well, what'd you get the steering box out of? Because I'm going to go to the junkyard and I'm going to bolt it on. I'm going to do the same thing you did, but I'm going to do it for $75. Well, unless you have the ability, I mean, you can put new holes in the frame and get around the mounting, you know, but unless you have the ability to respline the sector, you're never going to find a pitman arm to make it all work. And we do that rather than have pitman arms made, because when you deal with forgings to have the pitman arms made, you need ridiculous quantities, and it's just easier for us to remachine that because we have those capabilities. This is all the guts and pieces parts of a steering box right before assembly. Starting on the right side, there's the sector shaft with the two bearings that support it, the painted case and top cap in the middle. Just to the left of the case, that's what they call the rack block assembly. It's, you see both ends of it are round, that holds O-rings on there, and the fluid getting on either side of that is what's actually pushing things back and forth. That's basically a hydraulic piston. And the black component on the left, along with the worm piece above it, that's the actual valve and worm gear of the assembly. Every box we do is fully assembled by people, by hand. You know, everything's done with, we've made it easy. It's okay. You're building this box, you need the yellow torque wrench, you know, to set preload and everything. We've made it real easy to get consistency throughout. We're not afraid to buy tools, but we have calibrated torque, you know, 7-inch-pound torque wrench for over-center torque on a gearbox, and it's all we use it for. And we got 3 of them for our assembly area. So every box is consistently set the same. Then they're all put on our test fixture. where we're able to test it for obviously leaks. That's one thing you look for, because you can cut a seal when you put things together. Stuff happens. We're testing for leaks. We're testing for leak down in the valves, and we're also testing for leak down on the hydraulic piston. If you hold the gearbox to all the way to one side and you lose pressure on it, you got a seal problem inside the box. So we're able to completely test these. We try to drain them as best as possible, but the only person who can find the last bit of the fluid in there is the UPS guy. He throws it around and he finds that last little bit, and it's a very common phone call that, hey, I just got this steering box from y'all and I think it's leaking already. This whole thing's soaked inside here. And we say, ha, that's proof. It was tested. UPS man just found the fluid for you. Now we'll go a little bit through the current conversions that we have available. I think I have this kind of chronologically. I've mangled my notes at this point, and I'm just winging it. First one we came out with, first modern conversion using the Delphi 600 box, was for the 55 to 57 Chevys. We use a Delphi 600 series box, 12.7 to 1 ratio. It's going to be about 2 3/4 turns lock to lock. Bolts directly to the frame, connects right to the same existing pitman arm. The column has to be shortened, and that's very common in these classic applications because most of them contain what's called the spear of death, where it's one long piece from the steering wheel right into the steering box, and there's no break in there, no rag joint in there. So the column's got to be cut back, and then you just attach it up with a rag joint. And that whole kit, I mean, hardest part's getting the old stuff out. You could have all the new stuff bolted in 6 hours or so. The only change to the vehicle after this is bolted on, well, 2 changes. One, you've got power steering and you've got quick ratio power steering, so you might want to get a smaller steering wheel. And 2, for the alignment, you want to increase the caster. Factory caster settings on a manual and a factory power car about 0 to 1/2 degree positive. And with an integral modern power steering box, you want to go about to 3 to 4 degrees positive to get your best return to center. After that, after the 55 to 57s, we came out 58 to 64 Chevy Conversion. This one we did in a 14 to 1 ratio because it's got that awesome frame that's, broken in the middle. You don't want to go too quick on the steering on a 58 to 64 Impala. Bolts right to the frame. We did our box. We fixed one problem with this box that everybody was having with the other option out there. It interfered with the radiator. We designed this box to be able to bolt on with any 4-core radiator, larger aftermarket aluminum radiator. So we just have no fitment issues other than a 348, 409 that are so ungodly huge, you don't have a lot of room to adjust the power steering pump when you're done installing the whole setup. And on most of these, as it says here, we have just the box. We don't know what you're building. Or we have what we call a complete kit. But we sell the box separately because the guy who wants that kit might want a chrome pump, polished aluminum pulley, polished stainless U-joint and shaft rather than the stuff we put in there. When we kit something up, we usually do it all steel components, black components to keep the cost down. After that, we went after the Corvettes, and we have, I'll brag a little bit, for a 63 to 82 Corvette, we have the absolute best steering option there is, short of completely taking the chassis out from underneath it and replacing it with a professionally built aftermarket chassis. We have the best option. Good Guys Autocross champion last year running a Borgeson box in his Corvette. It's just the fewest amount of turns lock to lock, gives the best feel, and the rack systems out there for the Corvettes usually involve a double joint, a single joint, a support bearing, 12-pack of beer, and lots of cussing. This one's worked out great for us, the Mustang conversion. Never had any clue how many Mustangs there were in this world getting worked on until we came out with this conversion. And it just bypassed everything we were doing and selling for years and went right to the #1 conversion. We've got it available for 65 to 70 cars. Again, we do complete kits. This one, the kit on the bottom there is actually for a 65, 66 car. We provide that with a replacement steering column shaft, column floor mount, pump, bracket, pulley, hoses, the whole deal. And the Mustang box will also fit like the 62 to 65 Falcons and Comets as well. They share the same bolt pattern on there. This one's done in a 16:1 ratio. That has to do with the availability of the steering box we're starting with, not because customers want better, they want a quicker ratio, of course. And this one is currently available at 16:1, but to that I have to say I'm working on it. That one is using the Zuzu box. Yep. But I'm working on that because we bought something a couple of years ago that helps us make steering box parts now, so we'll get to that. Yep. Well, actually, we use that Isuzu box for the Mustang box, the full-size 52 to 64 Ford box, the mid-size Ford box, and the Nova box. All those cars share the same problem. There's shock tower set up in the way, and you can have no piston behind the sector shaft. They all need the piston in the front. And General Motors never made a steering box that had the piston assembly in the front. They were always in the back behind the sector shaft. So that's why they never lent themselves to be used in the Ford applications. You'd have to take a hole saw to the shock tower. So that's why, I mean, of course we would use a domestic box if we could, but we have to use the Isuzu box because of the piston assembly location. We also have a conversion for the mid-size Fords. I mean, this picks up the Falcons after 66 and just goes right on through. Basically, if it's a Ford car, it came with a Bendix slave cylinder control valve, we have a conversion for it. This actually gives you some comparison shots, you know, compared to the stock box. You can see the side view and top view. It's not too much bigger, but again, steering column modifications are required because all the bigger is on the steering column side. And that gives you, that overhead view gives you a real good idea how short it is in the back with that piston assembly being located in the front. This is our full-size Ford conversion. Again, we went with the same starting point for a steering box, the Isuzu. And we're actually buying brand new Isuzu steering boxes at this point and chopping them up because we couldn't get cores anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't know Mercury's, but they will see one before the tighter screws. Yeah. So this box right here will be. Yes. Yep. Now this box, we had to include a pitman arm with it. Not because we couldn't machine the sector shaft to fit the original pitman arm. We know how to do that. We needed more length out of the box. So the pitman arm we're including both fits the Ford tie rod end, plus gives that box an extra 1.5 inches of height, which we needed. We can't just drop the box down because you got to keep your input shaft in line with your column at the firewall, and there's not enough room to do joints and shafts in there. So we just made up the length on the pitman arm. We got a pitman arm made. That was one of those cases where we had to buy 1,500 pitman arms just to make that box long enough to fit in a full-size Ford application. Little one for the Chevy 2 Nova. This one gave us problems. This is our most problematic conversion. You've got the shock tower in the front, and you've got the firewall right there on the other side of it. So with this box, it really only works with the stock column only. You can't use an aftermarket column. That input shaft actually breaks the plane of the firewall. It's inside the car. The way we get away with that, if you see that shaft on the bottom there, that's a replacement column shaft for a stock column. That fits inside the column tube, and the column tube actually fits right over the nose of the gearbox and clamps to the nose of the gearbox. So even though the input shaft's inside the car, you don't even know it because the tube still comes through the firewall and the tube still clamps to the nose of the gearbox. But that one is that's just a problematic car to try to fit things into. Keep small tires on it, keep a small V8 in it, you don't need power steering. This is a little bit different one because the 62 to 82 Mopars, they had a power steering box. They never had a slave cylinder control valve for those years. So why would we do it? Well, remember that whole one finger thing we were talking about? That's why we did it. Not only did we do that, but we made something that is about 25% smaller than a factory power steering box. It's a quicker ratio, a lot lighter, and gives something the Mopar guys really need, exhaust clearance. This one, the box we're doing now, is actually making a late model Hemi swap and a early A body a possibility, and have power steering. Before it was a possibility, manual steering only. So this is a pretty new one for us, and right now the big problem with this box is cost. I know it. It's not a Mopar tax we put on it, but it's $200 more than every one of our other conversions. And that's because we have to chop up 3 steering boxes to make it. The Mopars are reversed rotation. So I've got the valve body from one box, the housing from another, and a sector shaft from another to create that. Yeah. Yep. That's where the price comes in, exactly. But that's something as well. I'm working on that too. We got different ways. I mean, that's the way we did it first. It's not the way we have to do it forever. We're a manufacturer. If we can make something, you know, better, that's less expensive, we recognize that we'll sell more of them. You know, and it doesn't mean it's cheap material. It means it costs us less to make. So we're going to pass that on because we just we know what we need to make on a part when we sell it.